Good morning. You are watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Asanov, and let's see the headlines. Donald Trump holds all U.S. military aid to Ukraine, White House official says. Pope Francis experiences respiratory complications and is back on ventilation. Turkish president warns of global conflicts if decision-making mechanisms fail to adapt. The United States is pausing military aid to Ukraine. It's just days after U.S. President Donald Trump clashed with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office. Our Ubi Shivander reports from Washington.
The fallout from that disastrous meeting with President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office last week continues to haunt Ukrainian President Zelensky. President Trump on Monday ordered a pause to all U.S. military assistance to Ukraine. The White House wants Zelensky to agree to accept U.S.-mediated peace talks with the Russian Federation. The Trump administration does not believe that Zelensky has been sufficiently appreciative of the hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. military and financial aid. Earlier on Monday, President Trump posted on social media his outrage against what he sees as Zelensky's refusal to support American brokered talks with Moscow. A White House official told reporters that President Trump is focused on reaching a peace deal to end the more than 3-year-long war and wants Zelensky committed to that goal. The official added that the U.S. was pausing and reviewing its aid in order to, quote, ensure that it is contributing to a solution. President Trump reportedly made his decision following close consultations with his senior advisors on Monday. They hope that the move will put added pressure on Zelensky to agree to Washington's demands and accelerate the timeline to accepting a ceasefire with Russia. And in other foreign policy news, President Trump has announced that major tariffs on Mexico and Canada will go into effect on March 4th. President Trump said that vast amounts of fentanyl have poured into the U.S. from Mexico, China, and Canada. Fentanyl, which is mostly produced in China and smuggled into the U.S. through Mexico and Canada, is believed to have contributed to the deaths of millions of Americans. A retaliatory trade war with the U.S.'s largest trading partners is expected by some economists, while the U.S. dollar has surged, especially against the Canadian dollar and the Mexican peso. Trump said that the tariffs are a message that, quote, it's going to be very costly for people to take advantage of this country. I'm Ubi Shivander for A News, Washington, D.C.
The United States is moving forward with 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, a decision that has already rattled financial markets. Economists warn that the tariffs could disrupt supply chains and drive up costs for businesses and consumers. Meanwhile, North American currencies have weakened, and investors are bracing for further economic fallout.
US President Donald Trump announced that 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada will take effect starting Tuesday. This statement heightened concerns about a potential trade war in North America and caused turmoil in financial markets. Trump's remarks on Monday triggered a sharp decline in US stocks during late afternoon trading, while the Mexican peso and Canadian dollar also weakened in response. He said efforts to stop the tariffs by tackling fentanyl inflows had failed.
It's honestly kind of insane. Both countries profit so much from each other. We're at Peace Arch Park where the sign says, may these gates never be closed again. We shouldn't be doing this again. We signed, we're partners. It's very frustrating because it's not a logical thing. It's really not.
I think it speaks to a larger issue that it is starting a trade war, and it's starting a race war, and it's starting a gender war. I mean, there's a lot of things at stake right now, and I don't think people are grasping how scary and how bad it's getting.
Business leaders and economists warn that tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods worth over $900 billion a year could seriously harm North America's economy. The Trump administration confirmed in Federal Register notices that the tariffs take effect from 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday. At that time, US Customs and Border Protection will start collecting a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico, with an additional 10% duty specifically on Canadian energy exports.
A last-minute setback for SpaceX. Monday's highly anticipated Starship test flight was called off just 40 seconds before liftoff. The company cited an unspecified issue with the rocket's core system. The mission, now delayed by at least 24 hours, aimed to deploy mock Starlink satellites for the first time. This would have been the first Starship launch since January's test ended in a mid-air explosion over the Caribbean, triggering a federal investigation. Mass layoffs at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration have sparked public outrage in the United States. Hundreds of people protested, demanding the reinstatement of fired employees and highlighting the potential serious consequences of these cuts. It's after President Donald Trump's administration fired more than 800 workers last week. The move comes as the agency continues to provide essential weather forecasting and hurricane warnings for the country.
Hundreds of people held protest rallies in several US cities. On Monday, they gathered outside the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration offices to oppose the mass layoffs.
I'm here with about 1,000 people at least, demanding that all dismissed workers at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration be reinstated immediately and no further cuts are made. NOAA is critical to safe seafood that we eat, to weather forecasts involving dangerous hurricanes. A million different ways NOAA is a critical part of our lives, and we need to keep this agency strong.
In Silver Spring, Maryland, demonstrators gathered under the slogan, "Save NOAA Now," demanding the immediate reinstatement of fired employees.
So NOAA does an incredible amount of work that everyday Americans sometimes take for granted. For example, weather forecasting, also things like making sure that we have safe seafood. They also help a lot with aspiring students and aspiring scientists to get involved in weather forecasting and things of that nature. So it's important for us to show support for an agency that truly needs to have more employees, not less employees, because everyone depends on their services.
Protesters believe that these layoffs could lead to serious consequences.
People don't, what I hope the American people will understand, hopefully from all the media coverage that this is getting, is that yes, NOAA impacts every aspect of people's lives in America, right? I think a lot of people know NOAA for the weather warnings and hurricane tracking and tornado warnings, and that is all super important. That stuff saves lives. And don't get me wrong, that is going to be impacted. I think we live in a less safer society now, and we're a lot more vulnerable to extreme weather now because of these impacts.
The mass firing of hundreds of NOAA employees last week has raised public concern. Demonstrators warn that critical services such as weather forecasting, hurricane warnings, and environmental research could be severely impacted by the layoffs.
A drone attack has hit critical energy infrastructure in Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa, causing power outages and knocking out heating systems. Ukrainian officials say the strike damaged key power facilities, leaving parts of the city in the dark. Odessa's mayor confirmed 3 boiler plants were knocked offline, and authorities are now working to restore heat to residents. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for security guarantees for his country and the need to end the war with a just peace. He says that accelerating diplomatic efforts and building a new security architecture with international partners are key factors in bringing the conflict to the end.
Today, at the staff meeting, we addressed some special issues concerning our state's resilience. We are working through all possible scenarios to protect Ukraine. The primary scenario is to maintain our positions and create conditions for proper diplomacy, ensuring that this war ends as soon as possible with a decent peace. We need peace, real, fair peace, not an endless war, and we need security guarantees. The lack of security guarantees for Ukraine 11 years ago allowed Russia to begin with the occupation of Crimea and the war in Donbass. Later, the absence of security guarantees enabled Russia to launch a full-scale invasion. And now, due to the lack of clear security guarantees, Russia is keeping this war ongoing. The whole world sees this and the whole world acknowledges it.
Відсутність визначених гарантій безпеки. Саме Росія тримає цю війну.
Today, we continued our work with European partners on a special diplomatic and security architecture, an architecture that can bring peace closer. This is something we discussed in London recently and before that with many world leaders. Ukraine, all of Europe, and America, together, we can ensure decades of stability. To achieve this, we must be constructive, work together, complement each other's proposals, and accelerate diplomacy to end the war.
І треба для цього бути в конструктиві, працювати разом, доповнювати.
German prosecutors say they had started investigative proceedings against a 40-year-old man, the suspect of intentionally driving into a crowd in the western German city of Mannheim for 2 counts of murder. At least 2 people were killed and several others injured on Monday. Police say the suspect shot himself in the mouth after driving into the gathering and was in hospital in a stable condition.
At least 2 people have died and several others have been injured after a car traveling at high speed ran into a crowd in the city of Mannheim in western Germany. Authorities activated Catwarn, a local warning system application, after detaining the car's driver, who is a 40-year-old German man believed to be acting alone.
We can also confirm that one person has been arrested as part of the investigation and the manhunt. We are unable to say whether there were several perpetrators. We have activated the Catwarn app and classified the area in Mannheim city centre as a dangerous place, so we are asking all residents and visitors to stay at home and evacuate this area.
Germany's federal government has issued an extreme danger warning in the city and say a large-scale police operation is underway. Meanwhile, passers-by say they have been shocked by the incident as they recall the moments following the crash.
There was a lot of traffic, and I was wondering what was going on anyway. I drove a little further into the city and suddenly saw a lot of police cars. I was really shocked to see what had happened. Suddenly I heard shots, and lots of people started running in my direction. I didn't know exactly what was going on myself. I stood off to the side. I was a bit scared. Well, I was just pretty shocked about what had happened.
Well, I was definitely scared and shocked at first. I come from Mannheim, and I have a lot of friends here, a lot of acquaintances who are often out and about in the city. I was out and about 2 hours ago myself, and it really shocked me that something like that happened here, especially after what happened to the policeman a few months ago, and now this again. So it's scary, in any case.
This incident occurred as crowds gather in cities across western Germany for parades to mark the carnival season. Authorities were already on high alert ahead of the carnival celebrations, but this car crash has prompted forces in other cities to noticeably increase their presence around carnival events.
Pope Francis has suffered a serious health setback. The 88-year-old pontiff experienced 2 episodes of acute respiratory insufficiency on Monday as he battles double pneumonia, Vatican said. Doctors at Rome's Gemelli Hospital say the Pope suffered significant mucus buildup in his airways, triggering a bronchospasm, a similar attack to an asthma attack. He underwent 2 emergency bronchoscopies and is now receiving non-invasive mechanical ventilation to aid his breathing. Despite stable blood tests, the Vatican says his prognosis remains guarded, meaning he's not yet out of danger. Officials believe the respiratory distress is part of his body's response to the infection. Turkey is calling for the need for fair representation of Muslim nations in international decision-making bodies. Speaking at the traditional ambassador's iftar in Ankara, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called for global decision-making mechanisms to adapt to changing world conditions. He warns that failing to do so could lead to political and military conflicts.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has renewed his call for reforms in global governance, particularly within the United Nations Security Council. Addressing ambassadors in Ankara, Erdogan stressed that the current system is inadequate in tackling contemporary global challenges.
Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi'nde veto yetkisine sahip bir İslam ülkesinin bulunması
The presence of an Islamic country with veto power in the UN Security Council is no longer just a need, it has become a necessity. The 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council consolidate power rather than ensuring a fair distribution of global influence. These nations prioritize power accumulation over justice, trying to suppress issues instead of resolving them. Resisting this wave of change will only exacerbate our problems in both scale and number.
Sorunlarımızın hem sayısı hem de ölçeği büyümeye devam edecektir.
Erdogan linked ongoing political and economic instability to deep-rooted systemic failures. He argued that global governance is in crisis, citing issues such as Islamophobia, xenophobia, trade wars, and territorial conflicts as symptoms of an unjust world order. He also warned of rising racial discrimination, terrorism, and far-right extremism, stating that if these issues go unchecked, they will lead to greater political and military instability. On regional matters, Erdogan reaffirmed Turkey's commitment to peace and stability. He addressed tensions in Syria, vowing that Turkey would not allow external actors to exploit ethnic and religious divisions for geopolitical gain. Additionally, he emphasized Turkey's role in promoting prosperity and stability in the South Caucasus. As Turkey continues to normalize relations with Armenia, Erdogan expressed hope that a lasting peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia would soon be reached.
Former head of Troika Dialogue and billionaire businessman Ruben Vardanyan is at the center of major financial and political scandals and now stands trial in Azerbaijan. Accused of money laundering, sanctions evasion and ties to the Kremlin, he also faced backlash for his Nobel Prize nomination and role in Karabakh.
Ruben Vardanyan, a Russian-Armenian oligarch and former banker. Investigations by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project revealed that Ruben Vardanyan's investment bank, Troika Dialogue, was central to a large-scale money laundering operation known as the Troika Laundromat. The scheme funneled billions of dollars from Russia to offshore accounts, benefiting Russian elites and Kremlin-affiliated figures. According to OCCRP, Vardanyan and his family personally received at least $3.2 million from the scheme, which covered expenses such as American Express payments, transfers to accounts belonging to his wife and family, tuition fees for his 3 children studying in the United Kingdom. Investigative journalist Paul Radu, who led the Troika Laundromat expose, stated that fake bank accounts under the names of impoverished Armenian citizens were used for multi-million-dollar transactions, often without their knowledge. While Vardanyan denies direct involvement, OCCRP findings suggest that his financial empire was deeply intertwined with Kremlin-linked networks. Vardanyan was also linked to Skolkovo, a Russian tech hub that received hundreds of millions of dollars in questionable loans. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny publicly criticized the initiative, arguing that it served as a vehicle for oligarchic enrichment rather than technological innovation. Navalny highlighted that Sberbank loaned nearly $250 million to the Skolkovo Business School, with Vardanyan and billionaire Mikhail Fridman personally guaranteeing the loan. Critics argue that this financial structure concealed illicit transactions disguised as legitimate investments. In 2022, Vardanyan renounced his Russian citizenship and relocated to Karabakh, assuming the role of state minister in the so-called unrecognized self-proclaimed Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. His sudden move fueled speculation that he was placed there by Moscow to maintain Russian influence in the region and counteract Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's pro-Western policies. Analysts argue that his appointment was a calculated geopolitical maneuver, allowing Russia to control Armenia-Azerbaijan negotiations while exerting broader influence in the South Caucasus. During his time in Karabakh, Azerbaijani authorities accused Vardanyan of funding and organizing illegal armed factions. The Azerbaijani State Security Service stated that his actions directly violated international and Azerbaijani law. Official charges under Azerbaijan's criminal code include Article 214-1, financing of terrorism, Article 279.3, participation in illegal armed formations, Article 318.1, illegal border crossing. Reports also suggest that he played a role in orchestrating anti-Azerbaijani demonstrations, framing environmental protests as an Azerbaijani blockade against Armenians in Karabakh. Due to his alleged financial and political activities, Vardanyan has faced increasing international scrutiny. Ukraine sanctioned him for alleged links to Russian military logistics. 46 US Congress members called for personal sanctions against him in 2022. The European Parliament urged financial restrictions due to his ties with Russian oligarchs. Ukraine's Mirotvorets database lists him as an enabler of Russian aggression. In a BBC Hard Talk interview, Vardanyan refused to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, further fueling suspicions of his loyalties. Reports indicate Vardanyan may have ties to Iran, a country accused of supplying Russia with drones used in Ukraine. Investigations suggest he may have engaged in economic dealings with Iranian-backed entities. In an unexpected turn, Vardanyan was nominated for the 2024 Nobel Peace Prize, sparking outrage in Ukraine and Azerbaijan. It is grotesque to nominate a person who supports terrorism, separatism, and corruption while financing Russian aggression, stated a letter from 18 Ukrainian MPs to the Nobel Committee. Political analysts labeled the nomination a lobbying effort by Armenian interest groups attempting to rebrand him as a humanitarian figure, despite Vardanyan's activities that have led to increased uncertainty in several geographic regions. Vardanyan was arrested on September 27, 2023, while attempting to cross into Armenia. Azerbaijani authorities claim to have substantial evidence linking him to terrorist financing and illegal activities in Karabakh. His trial, which began in January 2025, is being closely monitored as a potential precedent for prosecuting individuals involved in financial crimes with geopolitical implications. Western legal experts suggest that this case could reshape accountability for oligarchs accused of laundering money, funding separatism, and supporting military conflicts.
This Ramadan, a long-awaited reunion took place in Hebron. A former prisoner broke his fast for the first time in more than 2 decades, surrounded by family. The emotional gathering marked a significant moment as he and his loved ones came together once again.
After more than 2 decades of separation, a man was finally able to break his fast during Ramadan, surrounded by his family. His release, part of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Gaza, marked a poignant reunion with loved ones in the West Bank. The 65-year-old, who had been in prison since 2002, was among hundreds of Palestinian prisoners freed in exchange for both living and deceased Israeli hostages. On Saturday, the man reunited with over 70 family members in Hebron for a long-awaited celebration.
I was waiting for my first meeting with my children, to eat maklouba, my favorite Palestinian dish. That's what I was waiting for, to sit at the dinner table with my children, wives and grandchildren. This was my wish after being released from prison, to sit with them together and eat from the same plate, and to see my family who were away from me for the past 24 years, who were missing their father. They were deprived of their father for the past 24 years.
Having spent years in prison, the former inmate had even prepared the dish for fellow prisoners, keeping a connection to his culture despite the hardship of imprisonment.
To Algeria, where an annual campaign by the country's food bank aims to donate food parcels to 10,000 families during the holy month of Ramadan.
Volunteers gathered on the first day of Ramadan in Algeria's capital, Algiers, to help with the distribution of food items to families in need across the country. The initiative is part of the Algerian Food Bank program aimed at assisting 10,000 families across 20 provinces. This annual campaign, organized by humanitarian organizations, aims to embody the holy month of Ramadan's spirit of charity and community support.
Today we are here as part of the Ramadan Solidarity campaign for the Algerian Food Bank, like we do every year. This is the 13th edition of this project, in which we collect food items and distribute them to needy families across the country, in coordination with local associations at the national level. We aim to reach 10,000 families this year and provide them with this food parcel throughout the month of Ramadan, God willing.
I came to give my time and help people because no one can do this alone. We have to help each other and we meet new people.
The campaign focuses on not just providing food aid, but also engaging the youth as active participants within their communities with the intention of instilling values of giving and community service among younger generations.
An Australian man whose rare blood donations are credited with saving the lives of more than 2 million babies has died at the age of 88. Nicknamed the man with the golden arm, James Harrison saved 2.4 million babies by donating plasma over 1,100 times, according to the Australian Red Cross. His blood contained an antibody called anti-D, which was used to prevent hemolytic diseases of fetus and newborns. Doctors used his blood to help mothers whose blood was at risk of attacking their unborn babies. The 88-year-old passed away in his sleep at a nursing home. In China's Anhui province, a dazzling tradition is lighting up the streets, quite literally. The centuries-old fish lantern parade in Shejian County drew thousands of visitors during the Spring Festival and marks the second day of the second month in the Chinese calendar.
A traditional fish lantern parade in Shejian County in East China's Anhui province attracted more than 73,000 visitors during the Spring Festival holiday. The lanterns resemble carp, and it's hoped the event will bring blessings of success throughout the year. International tourists joined locals to celebrate the centuries-old craft, symbolising harvest and prosperity.
The most interesting part was the final parade. After the performances, people celebrated with giant fish lanterns, and we had the chance to touch them for good luck.
The glowing fish-shaped lanterns are handcrafted from bamboo and silk and take at least a day to assemble and paint. Larger versions require several days to complete.
I liked it. I thought making fish lanterns would be very difficult and require a lot of materials, but the craftsmaster taught me really well, and I finished 3 structures in about 2.5 hours.
The tradition also features dances that mimic the movements of fish. For some, though, it's a challenge.
It's really difficult. This is my first time holding the lantern. I have no experience, and the hardest part is doing these flips and turns.
With growing interest, local authorities are considering holding regular parades to preserve the tradition and meet tourism demand.
That's all for now. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful morning and keep watching A News.